So, separating the components of a contract. So, an entity for each for each lease component of a contract separately from from the non-lease components of the contract. So, a lessee allocates the consideration in the contract to each lease component based on the relative standalone price of the lease component and the aggregate standalone price of the non-lease component. So, relative standalone price is the price that the lessor or similar supplier would charge for a component separately. So, as if ibinebenta siya separately. But in this case, yung lease contract will offer it at a bundle. Okay, so magkakasama siya sa lease contract. Okay, lease of multiple assets. So, for a contract that contains rights to use multiple assets, lease to a list of two or more pieces of equipment. So the right to use each asset is considered a separate lease component if both of the following criteria are met. So letter A, the lessee can benefit from the use of the asset either on its own or together with the other resources that are readily available to the lessee, and the underlying asset is neither highly dependent on nor highly interrelated with the other underlying asset in the contract. So for example, the lessee's decision of not leasing one asset does not affect its right to use the other assets in the contract. So if the criteria are not met, then the right to use multiple assets is considered a single lease component. Okay. So letter A, magbe-benefit to si lessee kung uh, yung use of asset will be beneficial for the lessee to use it as a bundle. So in this case, let's say example is what ano ba? PC set. So kung mag-release ka ng PC set ng CPU lang, then it doesn't make sense, 'di ba? So kailangan may kasama siya monitor or anything na essential para magamit mo yung PC set. And letter B is underlying asset is neither highly dependent on or nor highly interrelated with. So dapat uh, yung asset daw is not dependent on each other. So if it is, then this is a single lease component. But if it is not, it is a multiple asset lease agreement. Hey, so what are the non-lease elements? So especially ang tinutukoy dito sa non-lease elements is yung mga non-tangible part ng lease, which is ito nga yung maintenance, security services, supply, so most of that things. So hindi siya part ng lease natin. So non-lease components are accounted for under the applicable standards. So for maintenance, it is not part of lease, same with security services, utilities, goods, and operational services. So payment for activities, okay, so hindi nga siya part. Ito yung mga example niya. Okay. Separating the component of a contract. Then ito siya. Okay, so the list components are, on this example, list components are the list of binder and printer converter. Okay, so a non-list components is yung maintenance services for 3 machines. So however, the contract requires a fixed annual payment of 240,000. So itemized as follows. So ito yung payment niya. Okay, 225, 11, and 4 for a total of 240. However, kung mapapansin natin dun sa fixed payment, meron tayong uh, non-lease payment. Ito siya, yung 4,000. So, what we will do here is kukunin natin yung stand-alone prices nila, which is, ito yun. This is stand-alone prices based dun sa current prices niya sa market, which is given naman dito. So, ipaprovide lang natin siya. And after prorating, makukuha na natin if how much is the part of the lease and how much is the part of not part of the lease. So on our example, the lessee shall recognize a lease liability right of use asset for the binder equal to 48 to the present value of 48,000. That is for the binder. And letter B, recognize lease liability to a right of use asset for the printer and converter equal to the present value no 180,000. Okay. And recognize the 12,000 allocated to the non-lease component as maintenance expense. So this is expensed out every month. Oh, sorry, every year. Ito yung i-expense out natin. So kung mapapansin nyo, yung printer and converter is treated as one because printer will not work without its converter. Okay? And for binder, magwo-work naman siya kung binder lang siya. Kahit walang printer and converter, gagana siya. So, ayun. Treated siya as separate list. Okay. So, ito na yung practical expedient. So, under PFRS 16, it allows the entity to elect by class of underlying asset not to separate the lease and non-lease component of a contract and instead account them for as a single lease component. Okay, so applying the practical expedient simplifies the accounting, but it would increase the amount recognized for the lease liability and right of use asset, and this could have an implication for impairment. So, ang sabi ni practical expedient, pwede mo namang hindi paghiwalayin yun. But again, uh, there is an implication of impairment in case na they will test it for impairment, then the value of the asset goes significantly lower than it is recorded, then there would be a higher impairment loss. Considering nakasama yung mga non-lease component under that lease if you uh, practice yung practical expedient. Okay? So, ito yung flow natin. So, initial amount of lease liability plus lease payment less the lease incentive received. So, ito yung deduction sa lease payment na i-grant ni lessor plus initial direct cost and additional cost of removing and restoring the leased asset. That is for right of use. And for lease payment, ito naman yung given natin. So, same lang. So, next is in substance fixed lease payment. So, in substance, fixed lease payments are payments that are variable in legal form, but in substance are unavoidable. So, example of these are payments made only if an asset is proven to be capable of operating during the lease, only if an event occurs that has no genuine possibility of not occurring. Okay. Next is payment that are initially variable, but for which the variability will be resolved in the future, which becomes in substance fixed when resolved. And lastly, arrangement in which there is more than one set of payments that a lessee could make, but only one of those sets of payments is realistic. So in this case, the lease payment are realistic set of payment. Okay, so yung mga example na yan ay makikita natin later. Okay, so lease incentives. So yung lease incentives, ito nga yung payments made by lessor to a lessee associated with the lease. So sometimes granted by the lessor itself or reimbursed or assumption by a lessor of cost of a lessee. So ito yung mga sinagot na costs ni lessor, okay, which is sometimes deducted sa lease payments. Okay, variable lease payments. So ito yung given natin kanina based on index rate. Okay, so initial accounting is included in lease liability and ROU, and subsequent accounting we should adjust the list and right of use when there is a changes or that there is a revision on the index rates. Okay, so let's continue. For illustration, variable list payment based on index. So on January 1, 2021, at the time of lease commencement of the lease, 125 yung CPI natin. But 2023, uh, naging 150 na siya. Okay? So nung naging 150 na siya, there is a 25% increase from 2021. So that is, paano natin nakuha yung 20%? That is 25 over 125. So that is 20%. Okay, so initial measurement of lease liability and right of use asset as of that year is by the annual payments of 100,000 multiplied by the present value of annuity due of 1. So meaning this is in advance. So 3.4 annuity due of 1 at 12% at 4 years or 4 periods. So the total is 340,000. And for this example, ito yung effective interest method niya. Okay? So there's a payment in advance. And then as of 2024, close na siya. But as of 2023, there's a changes ng CPI from 125 to 150. Okay? So the change would be uh, occurring on 2023, but on 2021 and 2022, all entries are the same. So, ganun pa rin siya. Okay? So, for 2023, as we have mentioned, there is a 20% increase sa CPI. So, again, list is variable depending on the changes in the consumer price index. So, since there is a change in CPI, specifically 20% increase from that of 2021, then the lease payment will also increase by 20%. Okay? So, 120,000 na siya ngayon. So, i-complete natin siya based on the remaining years. So, 2 years na lang, di ba? So, from 2023 and 2024 to 2024, sorry. So, we will now recompute it. Present value of annuity due of 1 at 12% at 2. Then, ito siya, multiply. So, ito na yung revised carrying amount natin as of the beginning of 2023. So, the adjustment is the difference between dun sa um, carrying amount niya based on the previous computation, which is ito, yung 169, sorry. Okay, 189,286 using so yung 189,286 came from this amount. 89,286 carrying amount on January 1, 2023 after the third payment, and i-add back natin yung 100,000. Ito siya. Okay? Yung beginning of January 1, 2023 since we are paying in advance. Okay? Oops, sorry. So, the difference would be 37,000. So, ito yung increase sa lease liability and ROU in effect of the change in variable lease due to the change in consumer price index. Okay. So, question. So, yung 227 na to, nandito pa yung 100,000. So, uh, after natin ma-revise, then magde-deduct tayo ng 120,000 na dito. Kasi mag-i-start na siya ng 120,000 lease payment. on January 1, 2023. Okay? So, ito yung magiging entry niya. Increase in ROU and increase in lease liability. And then, ito na yung magiging updated effective interest table niya. Okay? So, paid in advance. Then, next year, ito na siya. Close na siya. And ito yung subsequent entries. Okay? So, illustration 2, variable lease payments based on sales. So, ito, nakabase siya sa future. So, this is technically excluded from the measurement of the lease. Remember, ang basis natin ng CPI dito is this one, 125. Ito yung 125 na given on January 1, 2021 at the commencement of the lease. Okay? And don't forget na nakalagay yon sa ating qualities. Ano ba yung una? Layo pala. Ito. So, dapat for it to be considered as part of the lease payments, ano ba yun? Ito. Ay, ito ba yun? Ano yun? Ito naman kita. Ito. For it to be considered as part of the lease liability, so dapat measurement of index is available at commencement date, which should be compared sa mga uh, future na changes on that index. Okay? So that is the difference. Okay, yes. So this is based on sales, which is has no uh, conditional changes na assigned at commencement date. So that's why the variable payments based on this future sale, which is aka contingent rent, are excluded from the measurement of the lease liability and ROU. So these additional payments are considered expenses in P&L when the conditions occurred. So this will not for part nung ano natin, lease liability. It will be directly part of P&L if the company will pay that amount on top of the lease payments. Okay, so question. Okay, if wala, then let's continue. Residual value guarantee. So, RNB, residual value. This is the estimated amount that an entity would currently obtain from disposal of an asset after deducting the estimated cost of disposal if the assets were already or at the age or already of the age and in the condition expected at the end of its useful life. So a lessee includes a residual value on the underlying asset in the lease payments only if residual value is guaranteed. Yeah. So this will be only included as part of lease payment if it is guaranteed. So any unguaranteed residual value will be ignored. Okay. Residual value guarantee is the guarantee made to a lessor by a party unrelated to the lessor that the value of an underlying asset at the end of the lease will be at least a specified amount. So, dapat third party to. Okay? So, there is someone na mag-guarantee dapat ng residual value for it to be considered as guaranteed residual value. Otherwise, unguaranteed siya. Okay, so as to the lessee, residual value is guaranteed if it is guaranteed by the lessee or if it's guaranteed by a party related to the lessee. Okay? So, either third party and pwede na rin pala si lessee ngayon. Okay? So, when a lessee accounts for a residual value, this presupposes that the asset will revert back to the lessor at the end of the lease term. So, if there is a guaranteed residual value, it is also presupposes, meaning ina-assume na the asset will revert back to the lessor at the end of the lease term. So if the asset does not revert back to the lessor, so ownership will be transferred to the lessee. This indicates that the residual value is not guaranteed because it inures to the benefit of the lessee rather than to the lessor. And in that case, if hindi magre-revert back sa lessor, yung ownership na or yung uh, ownership will be transferred to the lessee and hindi na siya babalik kay lessors, then it is not a guaranteed residual value. It's more of a purchase option. Okay, so let's see an example. PFRS 16, on January 1, the annual rent payable beginning of each year is 50,000. Again, payable in advance. So we will use annuity due. Lease term is 4 years. Useful life of machine is 5 years. So implicit rate is 12%. ABC company guarantees a residual value of 15, of which ABC company expects to pay 10,000 on lease expiration when the leased asset is reverted back to the lessor. So there is a guaranteed residual value of 15,000, of which 10,000 lang yung babayaran ni lessee. Si lessee nga ba? Yes. So let's continue. The lease payment consists of 50,000 fixed payment and 10,000 expected payable on the guarantee. Okay, so 50,000 na uh, babayaran for 4 periods at 12%. So ito yung present value niya. And kukumpute lang natin yung present value of the guaranteed RV. So ito na yung magiging present value ng ROU natin. And for lease liability, since payable siya in advance, i-deduct na natin yung binayaran niya in advance for January 1, 2021. Then the remaining amount will be yung lease liability for that year. Okay, so same effective interest method table, then same computation. Yung depreciation natin is based dun sa pre-computed natin na list na ROU. Okay? So ROU divided by 4 since the ownership will revert back to the lessor. So we will use yung shorter of lease term and useful life. And kung makikita natin, mas maikli yung lease term na 4 years lang. So we will use the lease term of 4 years. Okay? And lease liability, 50,000, this is for the advance payment. The asset is depreciated over short term of its useful life and lease term because the lease contract does not provide the transfer of ownership or reasonably certain purchase option. So in that case, magre-revert back sa lessor yung ownership at the end or yung asset at the end of the lease term. So gagamitin natin yung shorter of lease term over the useful life. Also, the guaranteed residual value is not taken into account when computing for the depreciation because residual value inures to the benefit of the lessor. So again, hindi kino-consider yung residual value for the computation of depreciation on the part of the lessee because the residual value will not be, there will be no benefit si lessee. Okay? So all benefits will go to the lessor. That's why hindi niya kailangang i-depreciate yun. So, nothing to gain for lessee. That's why hindi siya kino-consider sa computation ng depreciation. Okay. Any subsequent changes in the amount expected to be payable on the guarantee is treated as a reassessment of the lease liability and an adjustment to the carrying amount of the ROU. So, consequently, to depreciation. So, for residual value, example number one, expected payment is equal to the actual payment. Okay. So, let's say natapos na yung lease term and yung fair value ng lease asset at the end of lease term is 5,000. So, to close the liability, kailangan magbayad the lessee kay lessor ng 10,000. Why? Kasi dito sa problem natin, makikita nyo, ABC company, which is the lessee, guarantees a 15,000 residual value, of which ABC is expected only to pay 10,000 on lease expiration. But again, ginagaranti niya yung 15,000. Okay? That's why, uh, ina-expect niya na ang magiging fair value lang nun at the end of the lease term is 5,000, which is exactly what happened dito. Okay? So, naging fair value lang niya is 5,000. So, magbabayad siya ng 10,000 kay lessor to account for the difference ng fair value at nung residual value. Okay, so case number 2 naman, expected payment is not equal to the actual payment. So, there is a loss naman. In this case, 3,000 na lang yung fair value niya. So, ang natitirang setup na lang natin ng lease liability is 10,000 kasi ito yung na-discount natin dito, kung maalala nyo. So, 10,000 lang. So, at the end of the lease term, 10,000 lang yung magiging present value niya. So, we will debit only 10,000 on lease liability. Then, the rest will be going to P&L under loss on guarantee and credit cash. Okay, so on other scenario, if the amount paid is less than the expected amount of 10,000, so let's say mas malaki yung present value niya, naging let's say yung fair value niya naging 10,000. So in that case, wala kang the difference is recognized as gain. So that is gain on guarantee. But if the fair value does not fall below 15,000, guaranteed amount and therefore none is paid to the lessor. The 10,000 carrying amount of the lease liability is recognized as gain. So, ito lang yung maximum na pwede mong i-recognize as gain. Kasi, pag nangyari naman, let's say, is ganito. Di ba ang 15,000 is the amount guaranteed by lessee, the lessor. So, let's say, naging 20,000 naman. 20,000 na yung fair value niya. So, 15,000 lang yung ginaranta niyo. Does that mean na si lessor naman yung magbabayad ng 5,000 kay lessee? So, in that case, hindi ganun. Hindi magbabayad si lessor. So, nothing will be paid. If the fair value does not fall below 15,000 guaranteed amount, and therefore, none is paid to the lessor. And at the same time, hindi rin magbabayad si lessor kay lessee for the difference. Okay? So, the best that the lessee can do is to recognize the whole expected payment amount as a gain. Okay? Kasi yung 10,000 na to, ito lang yung na-expect ng bayaran as mentioned dito sa problem. Okay, ito. 10,000 lang yung babayaran niya. Though 15,000 yung guaranteed niya. Okay? Question. Okay, so if wala, then let's continue on case number 3. Saan na ba yun? Case number 3, reassessment of lease liability. On December 31, 2021, ABC Company changes its estimate of amount expected to be payable on R&D from 10 to 12. So meaning, residual values is still 15, but the amount expected to be paid is now 12 from 10. In that case, babaguhin natin yung revised payment at fifth year. Okay? And i-recompute natin yung present values nila. So, we have here. And after ma-compute natin yung present values nila, i-compare lang natin yung total ng present values as recomputed from the previous one. So, adjustments would be reflected both on right-of-use asset and this liability. So, yun lang. I-increase lang natin yung present value na kailangan nating i-recognize for us to set up the correct amount na nai-guarantee natin to be paid kay lessor. Kasi otherwise, maiipit tayo ron sa entry natin na to, 10,000. So, until hanggang dito lang yung pwede natin bayaran. Then, the rest will be charged to P&L, which is not right. Hindi kasi yun yung nasa kontrata since there is a reassessment. So, if there is a reassessment, there is a potential change sa contract. Saan na ba yung reassessment? Ito siya. Reassessment. Okay. So, ito yung entry to reassess yung ROU and list liability. And ito yung revised na effective interest table natin. So, revised depreciation. So, it's already 2 years depreciated. So, 176. Ito yung initial amount recognized natin. It is already depreciated for 2 years. Kasi January 1, 2023 nangyari yung changes. So, ito na lang yung book value niya. Then, plus yung adjustment. So, ito na yung revised amount of ROU. Then, i-divide na lang natin siya by remaining years, which is 2. And that is the revised depreciation expense. So, 44,909 na siya ngayon from, nasa na yan? From 44,112. Naging 44,909 na siya. Okay. So, illustration 2, using the traditional method. So, ito yung old standard. Ito yung standard na alam ko. Okay? So, from our previous standard, kahit magkano pa yung bayaran ni, kung magkano pa yung babayaran ni, let's say, 15,000 yung R&B. Pero ang sinabi is 10,000 lang yung babayaran. So, no matter what, 15,000 pa rin yung yung kailangan mo i-set up. So, kung ang babayaran mo is 12,000 na lang, then you will recognize again at the end of the lease term. Okay, so kung mapapansin nyo, walang ROU. Machine lang yan. Then, cash. Same amount goes. Same periodic table. Sorry, periodic table. Same periodic payments in effective interest table. And interest expense is computed again based dito. Same lang naman, wala namang pinagbago. Accrued interest payable if it is not paid, but cash if it is already paid. And depreciation expense is 41,156. So again, the asset is still depreciated over the shorter of useful life in this term since there's no conveyance of ownership. However, the guaranteed R&D is deducted when depreciating the machine. Why? Kasi yung guaranteed residual value na to is guaranteed to be reverted back to the lessor. Okay? That is the difference from old to the new standard. Siya yun. Ngayon, on new standard, you will not, ah, hindi mo kailangan i-consider yung R&D sa depreciation because that will not form part of the benefit of the lessee. So all the benefit for the R&D will go to the lessor. Okay. So for residual value, if the fair value of the machine on January 1 is 15 or higher, then ABC company will pay nothing. So simply closing entries lang yan. To-close lang niya na ganun. So kung mapapansin nyo, after the end of the lease term, derecognition ng asset ang entry. As if, ano na siya, fully depreciated na siya. Ganun siya. Unlike ngayon na ROU, yung i-close natin. In this case, machine. So, close mo na talaga siya. On case number 2, fair value of machine on January 1 is 5,000. So, therefore, 10,000 will be paid to the lessor. So, that full 10,000, yung buong difference nung R&D dun sa fair value, yun yung babayaran mo. On top, dun sa lease liability mo. Okay, and next is, ayun, so yun lang ang difference niya. Unlike sa bagong standard na hindi mo i-recognize yung buong R&D if there is a specified amount na babayaran mo lang in consideration do sa residual value. Okay? So, take note of that. Okay, so let's continue. Purchase option. So, the exercise of a purchase option is included in the lease payments and consequently in the measurement of the lease liability and ROU asset if the exercise is reasonably certain. So, let's have an example. Okay. So, on January 1, 2021, ABC company list a machine information on the list is shown below. Annual lease payment is 200K. So, lease term and useful life is the same. Parehas lang sila. So, we will use implicit interest rate, which is 10%. So, the lease contract grants ABC company a right to purchase the machine at the end of the lease term for 20,000. And the expected fair value of the machine at the end of lease term is 50,000. So, ito yung fair value ng machine at the end of lease term. It is reasonably certain that ABC will exercise the option. ABC uses the straight line method of depreciation. So, again, i-recognize lang natin yung, or i-recognize natin yung mga present values ng mga part ng lease payments natin. Okay, so for the first is yung fixed payment na 200,000, which is kukumpitan natin ng ordinary annuity since ang payment is given at the end of each year. So we will use ordinary annuity of 1 at 10% for 5 periods. So ito siya. Multiply lang natin sa fixed payment. And yung purchase option ng 20,000 multiplied sa present value of 1 at 10% for 5 periods. So, ito na siya. Ito na yung present value niya. Okay, so the entry to recognize the ROU is debit to ROU and credit to lease liability at the same amount. So, ito yung amortization table natin. And for the first year, ito yung enter natin. Interest expense, 77,000. Lease liability is 122,942 and credit cash. So depreciation is 144,115. So that is 770,576 less yung 50,000 na fair value ng asset at the end of this term, which is considered also the residual value for depreciation purposes kasi ito yung present value niya. Okay? And uh, divided by 5 because yung useful life and lease term is the same. So we will only use 5 years. So current and non-current portion. So makikita mo naman yan dito. Ito yung non-current portion and yung current portion is this one. Okay? So the entry to record the final lease payment, the exercise of the option is as follows. So debit interest expense na 20,000. So ito yun. Ito yung diniscount natin na 20,000. Okay? It is recorded as interest expense and uh, debit list liability for the last payment and credit cash 220. So the recognition exemption of a short-term lease cannot be applied if a lease contains a purchase option. Parang puto. Okay? So, wala lang talaga ako sa notes. Okay? So, ganun lang siya. Upon exercising of the purchase option, which is ito, yung additional payment niya on top dun sa 200,000 na babayaran dapat niya at the end of the lease term, then this effectively transfer the ownership of the asset from the lessor to lessee since it is already purchased, di ba? Okay, so let's continue. Initial direct cost. So initial direct costs are incremental cost of obtaining a lease that would not have been incurred if the lease had not been obtained, except for such costs incurred by a manufacturer or dealer lessor in connection with a finance lease. So a lessee capitalizes initial direct costs as follows. So general recognition should be uh, part of the cost of the right of the ROU and include in depreciation. But for recognition exemption, it could be also treated as prepaid rent and recognized as expense under the straight line basis or another more appropriate basis. So again, this is the general recognition. Should be part of ROU, but it would never be part of lease liability. However, there is an exemption to the recognition principle that it could be treated as prepaid rent and recognized as expense under the straight line basis method. Okay, so let's see an example. On January 1, 2021, ABC company leased a new machine. Wait for a while. Okay, so ABC leases a new machine from XYZ Incorporated. Information of the following lease of the lease are follows. So lease is 5 years. Annual rent is payable at the end of each year. So 40,000. Useful life is 8 years. So hindi given yung lease term. So meaning there should be a purchase option. Okay? Implicit rate is 14%. Additional info. So ABC has the option to purchase the machine at the end of the lease term by paying 50,000, which is expected to be approximately equal to the fair value. So we will have no problem identifying kung ano yung i-deduct for the purpose of uh, depreciation since fair values and uh, purchase option is the same. So ABC reasonably certain to exercise the option. So the annual rental payment includes 3,000 to cover insurance cost, and the insurance cost does not transfer due to services to ABC. So this 3,000 pesos should not be part of the uh, lease liability, right? So initial direct cost incurred by ABC in negotiating the lease is 20,000. So let's continue. So fixed payment, 40,000, which is the annual fixed payment. So kukuha natin yung present value niya at 14% for 5 periods, which is present value niya is this one is given. And the purchase option also, yung present value niya at 14 at 5 periods. So again, ito yung present value niya. So the total present value of ROU and lease liability is this one. Before considering yung initial direct cost natin. Okay. So notes. The insurance cost is not treated as a separate component of the contract because it does not transfer goods or services to the lessee. So hindi part yung insurance. So hindi natin kailangan idagdag yun. The purchase option is included in the lease payment because exercise is reasonably certain as mentioned naman dito. Okay? Ito siya. And this treatment, sorry, even though it is not bargain paid. This treatment differs from the treatment under the old standard 17. Right? And the initial direct cost is included in the cost of the ROU, which is, ito siya. Okay. So, kung mapapansin nyo, upon recording the entry, ROU is 183 and list liability is 163 only. So, initial direct cost is usually the culprit pagka may difference between ROU and list liability. Since initial direct costs are usually sila lang yung nako-consider as part of ROU but cannot be part of the list liability. Okay, so if there is any difference between ROU and list liability at commencement, so probably initial direct cost yan. Yun yung difference na yun. So there may be a problem na I will be asking for initial direct cost and ang binigay ko lang ng mga figures is this amount, then dapat alam nyo na kung paano siya compute. Okay? So, credit cash 20,000 for the paid initial direct cost, which was also included na doon sa ROU natin. Okay, so ito yung amortization table natin or the effective interest table. And depreciation is 22,912 for per year for 8 years. Okay, so the asset is depreciated over its useful life since there is a purchase option which is reasonably certain to be exercised. Okay, question. Okay, if wala, then let us continue. Lease payments made to the lessor at or before commencement date. So example of lease payments made to the lessor at or before commencement date are advance rent. So it arises when the rentals are payable at the beginning of each period. So based sa mga examples natin, when it is computed using the annuity due. Another is this is also excluded from the initial measurement of this liability because again, it is already paid at the beginning of the period. So it is not a liability anymore. And recognition exemption, it could be treated as prepaid rent and recognized as expense under the straight line basis on a case-to-case basis, which is not the case for previous examples. Okay, so lease bonus is an additional payment made by a lessee to a lessor to induce granting of leasehold rights to the lessee. So, parang, additional payment para sa kanya i-grant yung lease. So, lease bonus is the opposite of lease incentive. So, lease incentive decreases the lease payments while lease bonus increases it. So, same accounting as advanced rent above and same treatment for the rent above for recognition exemption. Okay, so security deposits. So, another form of payment made to the lessor at or before commencement date is yung security deposit. So, ito yung usual security deposit na alam natin na at the end of the term is or at the end of the transaction is mare-refund natin. So, ito yun. Walang pinag-iba yun. So, security deposits are intended to compensate for any damages. So, this is conditional pa. Okay? So, makukuha mo siya if there's no damage caused to the leased property. If no damage is made to the leased property, then the lessor returns the security deposit to the lessee at the end of the lease term. So, the lessee accounts for a security deposit as a receivable measured at amortized cost, but it is not, sometimes hindi siya receivable, tinitreat, tinitreat siya as other assets. Okay? Kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng i-ano yan eh. Receivable is financial asset. Okay? But security deposits is not considered to be a financial asset. So, hindi mo siya pwedeng ipambayad. Oh, may security deposit ako. Ito na lang yung bayad ko sa services mo. Which is not the case in the real corporate world. Okay? So, the lessee accounts for security deposit as receivable, okay, measured at amortized cost. So, the lessor accounts for it uh, oppositely as a payable measured at amortized cost. Consequently, security deposits do not affect the lease liability and right of use asset. So, wala siyang effect. As if nandun lang siya. Separate treatment lang siya. So, deposits not to be applied as a rental payment at the end of lease term are not security deposit, but rather advance payment. So, ito yung difference ni security deposit kay advance rent. Security deposit are tend to be refundable at the end of the lease term, while yung advance rent is hindi mo na siya ma-recover but will be applied as a payment to rent on some future periods. Okay. So, illustration for security deposit. Lease payment made at or before the commencement. Okay, so on January 1, ABC leases an asset which annual rental payable is 100,000 at the beginning of each year. So, we will use ordinary annuity. Lease bonus paid to the lessor at commencement date, which is 20,000. So, this is an advance payment. Lease term is 5 years, so there will be no purchase option since lease term lang yung binigay. And implicit interest rate, 12%. So, general recognition, usual computation lang natin. The present value of ordinary annuity. Ito yung factor, then multiply lang natin. So, ito yung initial measurement of lease liability. Then, plus yung initial payment na 100,000 since we will always pay at beginning of each year. And yung lease bonus na 20,000. So, this is the initial measurement of the right of use asset, which is yung 423, 423,000. So, ROU 423, lease liability is 303, which is ito lang yung liability after the payment on January 1, 2021 of the first lease payment bonus and first lease payment and the lease bonus. Okay. So, subsequent measurement of ROU. So, yung ROU natin will be depreciated over 5 years. So, simply, i-divide lang natin siya by 5. Then, that is the depreciation natin. as stated naman dito sa baba. Okay. Case number 2, recognition exemption. So, ABC company elects to apply the low value lease recognition. So, in this case, gagamitin natin is straight line. Straight line method lang. Walang special na rates na kailangan natin gamitin. So, fixed lease term is 100, multiply by 5, plus mo lang yung additional cash outflow na 20,000. Then, 520. So, divided by 5 lease terms, then ito na yung magiging annual expense niya. Okay. So, entries is ito. And ito na yung magiging uh, straight line table niya. Compare dun sa ating case 1, which is using yung fair value model. Or sorry, yung amortized cost model. Okay. So, reassessment to, sorry, question. Baka may tanong kayo. Okay, so if wala, then let's continue. Reassessment of the lease liability. So, a lessee remeasures the lease liability and adjusts the right of use asset if there are subsequent changes to the lease payments. However, if the carrying amount of the ROU is reduced to zero and there is a further reduction, the excess adjustment is charged to P&L. Okay. So, ang sabi dito, if the lessee measures the lease liability and if there is a subsequent changes to the lease payment, however, if the carrying amount of the ROU is reduced to zero and there is a further reduction, the excess adjustment is charged to P&L. So, kung na-zero na raw yung ROU, then yung adjustment shall be made to P&L na directly, not na hindi nadadaan sa kay ROU. Since na-zero naman na siya, tuloy ka na ng P&L. So, the lease liability is remeasured by discounting the revised lease payment using a revised discount rate. If there is a change in the lease term, or the revised lease payments are determined based on the revised lease term, and there is a change in the assessment of a purchase option. Ito lang yung usual na reason para magkaroon ng changes in lease payment since mababago yung lease term, mas lalaki pa yung present value ng lease natin. Okay, that is the case. And letter B, there's a change in assessment of purchase option. So, definitely, mababago yung present value notation natin. So, mababago din yung uh, present value ng lease liability natin. Okay, so the revised discount rate is the interest rate implicit in the lease for the remainder of the lease term. So if that rate cannot be determined, the revised discount rate is the lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the end, at the date of the reassessment. Okay. So, ang sabi nito, if kung hindi raw determinable yung implicit rate for the remainder of the lease, so the revised discount rate is the lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the date of reassessment, not at the date of the commencement. Okay? So, kung hindi raw given yung implicit rate at the time of reassessment, so we will use yung incremental rate at the time of reassessment as well. Okay? Okay, malilito date of reassessment and not the date of commencement of the lease. And next is the lease liability is remeasured by discounting the revised lease payment using an unchanged discount rate. If there is a change in residual value guarantee, the revised lease payment shall reflect the change in the amount expected to be payable under the residual value guarantee. And letter B is the change in future lease payment resulting from a change in an index or a rate used to determine those payments. So in this scenario, this liability will be remeasured by discounting the revised list payment using yung unchanged discount rate for these two examples. So same discount rate will be used. Okay, so illustration. Change in list term. Ah, sorry, for a while lang. Okay, sorry, minum lang ako tubig. Tutuloy lang muna. Okay, so let's continue. Change in this term. So on January 1, 2021, Entity X enters into a 3-year lease of an office space. So the annual rent is 100,000, payable in advance. Entity X has an option to extend the lease for another 3 years at an annual rent of 120,000, which Entity A is uncertain to exercise because it believes there is no economic incentive to do so. So the implicit interest rate is 12%. Okay? On initial measurement, the fixed payment is 100,000 as mentioned dito. Okay, 100,000 multiplied by the present value of an ordinary annuity, which is 2.69005. So multiply lang natin. Then the ROU is 269,005. Cash is 100,000 as payable in advance. And lease liability is 169,005. Okay. So subsequent measurement, same lang until third year. So ito lang yung magiging depreciation natin for third year. Kasi magkakaroon ng uh, it is uncertain na i-exercise because there is no economic benefit to do so. So that's why hindi na-push yung transaction nila. Okay. So, yun. Kaya until 3 years lang siya. But if there is extension, then ito na yung susunod. Reassessment of lease liability. So on December 31, 2022, due to a significant change in circumstances, Entity X is not reasonably certain to extend the lease. So the revised implicit interest rate is 10%. So nabago siya from 12, naging 10 na siya. Okay. So accounting, okay, so the total lease term is changed from 3 to 6, of which 4 years remain kasi yung first two is already consumed since on December 31, 2022 siya nang ah, ma-assess niya na reasonably certain na niya na ah, i-extend yung lease. Okay? And next is the revised lease payment are 100,000. due on January 1, 2023 for the last year of the previous lease and will now be 120,000 for the next 3 years. Sorry. And the present value of the revised lease payment is computed as follows. So ito yung due on January 1, 2023. So there will be no present value since it will be paid at the same day. Okay? Hindi siya babayaran at year end. So wala na siyang present value. Oh, and the next are due on first to 3 years. So the present value would be 298,442. Okay. So ito na siya. Ito na yung revised na lease liability natin. So kung mapapansin nyo, as of January 1, 2023, it should be zero. Actually, it should be zero kung nagbayad na siya. But hindi pa siya nagbabayad. So dito, kung mapapansin natin, may 100,000 pa. Okay? Kasi nga, hindi pa siya nagbabayad dito. Okay? So kasi nagkaroon tayo ng assessment on December 31, 2022. Which is, nandito pa siya. Okay. So the increase would be 298,422. Okay, so ito na yung magiging increase niya. So i-add back lang natin yung 100,000 kasi nga hindi pa siya bayad as of December 31, 2022 kasi this January 1 pa lang siya magbabayad, di ba? So to record the increase, it would be 298,422 debit for ROU and same amount debit to lease liability. Okay, so here's the revised amortization table. And initial measurement, ito, divided by, multiply by 1/3 para makuha na lang natin yung remaining na carrying amount ng asset, which is ito yung 89, plus lang natin yung adjustment. And ito na yung makukuha na natin yung revised na ROU figure, then i-divide na lang natin siya by the remaining 4 years. So the revised annual depreciation will be, ito na siya. So from 89,668, naging 97,023 na lang siya for the remaining, naging 97,023 na siya for the remaining 4 years. Okay, so that's how you compute if there is a reassessment. Question? Okay, if none, let us continue. So lease modification. Lease modification is a change in the scope of a lease or the consideration for a lease. It was not part of the original terms and conditions of the lease. For example, adding or terminating the right to use one or more underlying asset or extending or shortening the contractual lease term. So this is different from reassessment in this extent that it could add and terminate the right to use. For reassessment, pwede lang natin galawin is yung technically, ano lang siya, yung mga nasa contract lang na like amortization years, lease term, assessment or extension of the lease. However, in lease modification, we are modifying the lease itself, hindi lang yung terms. So that's why yun yung difference ni lease modification kay reassessment. Okay, so depending on the nature, a lease modification is accounted for as a separate lease or remeasurement of the existing lease liability and right of use asset. Okay, so let's start yung una. A separate lease. So lease modification is accounted for as a separate lease if both the scope and consideration in the lease are increased due to the addition of a right to use one more underlying asset and increase in the consideration reflects the standalone price for the increase in scope. So no adjustment is made on the existing lease liability and ROU from the original contract. So there is an increase in the underlying assets. Okay? So, yun yung difference. However, for a not a separate list, so this is another list. A list modification that does not result in a separate list is accounted for as a remeasurement of the existing list liability and ROU. So the list liability is remeasured by discounting the revised list payment using a revised discount rate, which is what we have done previously. Kung ano yung ginawa natin. That is the remeasurement. So nag-remeasure tayo or nag-reassess tayo. Okay. So for list modification, that decrease the scope of the lease. So the carrying amount of the right of use asset is decreased to reflect the partial or full termination of the lease, and any gain or loss is recognized in P&L. So for all of the other lease modification, a corresponding adjustment to the ROU asset is made. So let us have an example in lease modification under separate lease. So on Entity X enters into a 10-year lease for retail space at an annual rent of 10,000. Okay. Sorry, 100,000. At the end of the fourth year, the lease is amended to include the lease of an adjacent retail space for the remaining 6-year term of the lease at an additional rent of 110,000 per year. So the additional rent reflects the market rate for the lease of the additional space, adjusted for the discount that Entity X receives for the cost of saving of the lessor. So, negotiation costs that the lessor would have otherwise incurred if the additional space was leased to a new tenant. Okay? So, analysis, so yung analysis dito is the lease modification shall be accounted for as separate lease because both the criteria, increase in scope and due to addition to the right of former underlying asset, and there is an increase in consideration because ito nga, there would be an increase of retail space, which is the adjacent retail space, and there will also be an increase in payment, which is from 100,000 magiging 110 na siya. So, both of that criteria is met. So, it is considered a new lease, a separate lease. Okay? So, accordingly, Entity X continue to account for the lease liability and the right of asset from 10-year lease without remeasurement. So, as is lang yung nauna, as is lang tong first na 10-year na to, and recognizes a separate lease liability and ROU asset from the 6-year of the additional retail space. Okay, so as if magkaiba sila. So, separate lease, that's why it is called as separate lease. However, for lease modification, which is not a separate lease, uh, ito naman yung modification of terms like lease into a 5-year lease of 1,000 square meter office space, annual rent is 100, payable at inch, and the interest rate implicit in the lease cannot be determined. So, incremental borrowing rate yung ginamit, which is 12% per annum. So, ito na yung computation niya. And ito na yung ating amortization table. And there is an increase in scope of lease and there is also an extension of lease term. So, in this case, lessee and lessor agree to amend the original lease by extending the contractual lease term by 2 years. So, in this case, hindi na siya separate lease. Okay? The annual lease payment are unchanged. So, 100,000 pa rin. No change in the total amount na babayaran. But there is increase in term of the lease. So, magiging additional, magkakaroon ng 2-year additional and the incremental borrowing rate would be 13% from 12. Okay, so this modification does not qualify as separate lease because there is no increase in the underlying asset. and there is no increase in the payment. Kaya kung mapapansin nyo, nagkaroon lang ng additional 2-year lease term and nagkaroon lang ng increase sa incremental borrowing rate. So in that case, hindi siya separate lease. So same computation goes kung paano lang natin siya ginagawa previously in reassessment of lease liability. Okay, so case number 2, decrease in scope. So in this case naman, on January 1, 2014, 2024, lease and lessor agreed to amend the original lease by reducting the space rent from 1,000 to 500. The annual lease payment are also reduced from 100 to 60,000, payable at the end of 2024 and 2025. So lessee's incremental borrowing rate is on January 2024 is 11%. So again, it is not a modification of a separate lease, because this lease modification does not qualify as a separate lease because the criteria are not met. So accordingly, it is accounted for as a remeasurement of the existing lease liability and right of use asset. So always remember, for it to be considered as separate lease, there should be an increase. Okay, an increase on both underlying asset and the consideration. Okay, so question. Okay, if not, and tuloy tayo. So case number 3, full termination. On January 1, 2024, right? Okay. So on January 1, 2024, lessee and lessor terminate the lease, and lessor sells the entire building for the lessee to the lessee for 2 million. So step 1, lessee reduces the carrying amount of the existing ROU asset and lease liability in proportion to the decrease in the scope of the lease liability. So for example is full termination. So like 100%. So buong lease contract would be terminated since the full building will be sold to lessee. Okay. So in this case, based on the given lease liability, then ito yung entry natin to record the full termination of the lease liability. And kukunin natin yung, ano ba yan? Yung computed natin na, ito, yung carrying amount ng ROU after 2 years of depreciation. Wala palang table. Walang amortization table. So, ito siya. Ito lang yung ROU balance natin. So, the gain is computed by just deducting yung dalawa. The amount of lease liability extinguished against the ROU asset being relinquished naman. So, this is the gain. And to record the purchase of the whole building, then there will be a debit for building, which is an equipment, PPE account, and cash, 2 million. Okay. So, ganun lang siya. If the termination would be is caused by the procurement o bebenta na ni lessor yung property, kukunin lang natin yung kanilang book values. Kuklose lang natin yun. Then, the difference will be the gain or loss. And record the pertinent entries if necessary kung siya yung bibili. But kung iba yung bibili, then wala tong entry na to. Okay? So, next is leasehold improvements. Okay? So leasehold improvement are recognized as asset, separate from the right of use assets, and depreciated over the shorter of the life of the improvement and the remaining lease term. Okay, so yung leasehold, ito yung mga ginastos mo like halimbawa nagrerenta ka, pinapintahan mo, naglagay ka ng iba't ibang, furnitures to make the leasehold more productive, then that is the leasehold improvement. Okay? Separate account siya tinitreat sa financial statement and it is also depreciated over the shorter of life of improvements or the remaining lease term provided walang purchase option. But if there is, then pwede mong gamitin yung useful life of asset kahit mas mahaba yung useful life of the asset over the remaining lease term. Okay? So presentation on statement of financial position, ROU is presented separately from other assets. Yes, dapat mo siyang i-separate kasi separate line item siya sa financial statement. And letter B, together with the other asset as if they were owned with disclosure on of the line items that include the ROU. Or if you have a group of asset that this list asset is similar to those asset, then pwede mo siyang i-group as part of one line item in the financial statement provided there is a disclosure that yung breakdown will disclose na this asset is under lease, which includes ROU. Okay, so ROU assets that meet the definition of investment property are presented as investment property. Okay, so kung investment property naman yung usage mo, yung sa RO sa asset being list or the ROU, then you can uh, present this liabilities as a separate line item from other liabilities and together as well kung meron kang same liabilities with uh, the same or similar nature. Okay, so for PNL and comprehensive income, depreciation and interest are presented separately. So offsetting is not uh, an option. Interest on the lease liability is component of finance costs and depreciation is part of operating costs. Okay. So questions? Okay, if wala, let us continue. So summary. So ito yung mga essential elements to identify a lease. So there should be a identify the asset. Yes, there is. If there is, then this is a lease. And right to obtain all of the economic benefits. So dapat lahat na economic benefits on economic activities on that asset being leased should be belong to the lessee and not the lessor. Okay? And the right to direct the use provided in pasok siya sa limitations and agreement with the lessor, then it is also a lease. Okay. I think this is recap. Okay, so I think that's all. So natapos natin yung lease on lessee's perspective. So next week, itatakal naman natin si lessor on lessor's perspective naman. Yes, tama. Lessor's perspective. Okay. So, yes, next week, leases tayo on the part of lessor's perspective. So, kung mapapansin nyo, masyado tayong behind and I think hanggang next week na lang yung klase because December 1 and 2 will be the finals exam. And for us, December 3 yung finals natin. And the grades would be available within that week as well. Kasi 7 and 8 yung requirement ni Dean na masubmit yung grades. So, doon sa nagsabi sa akin na hahabol siya and iti-take niya yung from prelim to midterm until I will give you until this week. Sabihan mo kung kailan yung schedule and I will provide the link. Okay, so please refrain from uh, giving hints kayo rin. So, di ko maalala yung pangalan niya, pero message mo lang ako kung kailan. Okay? And what else? Okay, so finals will be the 3rd. And kahit sabihin ko kay Sir Tano kasi na mag-makeup schedule tayo, hindi na naman pwede sa schedules nyo. So, siguro gano'n na lang. Hanggang list na lang tayo on Lesur's perspective. Okay? So, I think that's all. Thank you for attending the class and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you po, sir.